first of all, I'd like to state...
yeah.
No, say what you have to say.
No, I wanted to give him that. Because
no, please.
I think yes. This is the MPP constitution.
Please go ahead.
Well, first of all, I'd like to say emphatically that as far as I'm concerned, there's no constitutional crisis in Ghana. Indeed, what there is a bunch of irresponsible and immature politicians hell-bent on getting their way at any cost. That is what we have. Now, why do I say this? If you take the 1992 Constitution, it's as clear as the difference between day and night. It's so very clear that even children in nursery school will have no difficulty understanding what the Constitution says and what the Constitution intended to achieve. So very clear. And you see, I think it's important for us to go to the text of the Constitution. And we are referring to Article 97, 1, G and H. And Senna, listen very carefully. It says, a member of Parliament shall vacate his seat in Parliament. G, if he leaves the party of which he was a member at the time of his election to Parliament to join another party or seeks to remain in Parliament as an independent member. Or H, if he was elected a member of Parliament as an independent candidate and joins a political party. How can there be any misunderstanding about this? Under what circumstance can there be any misunderstanding about this? It is not for the purpose of pursuing a mischievous agenda. Who can generate a dispute about this? Indeed, if you go to the text of the Constitution, the Speaker is not even required to declare any seat vacant. The Speaker is not required to declare any seat vacant. The Constitution is clear that the member of Parliament himself or herself has to vacate automatically. Once you leave the ticket on which you came into Parliament, automatically you have to vacate your seat. Clear. What other interpretation can there be? No, I submit that there can be no other reasonable, sensible, logical interpretation of this provision. It is not possible to have a logical interpretation of this position other than the fact that if you change the ticket on which you were elected into Parliament, you yourself have to leave Parliament immediately. It's clear. Now, I've heard all kinds of arguments which are very, very, very strange. All kinds of arguments, which are exceedingly strange. Now, one of those arguments is that the Constitution, if you interpret the Constitution, you can come to the conclusion that no people in a constituency should be disenfranchised. That at all times, people need to be represented in Parliament. But you see, that's a lie. It's a barefaced lie. There's nothing in this Constitution which upholds that position. Because this Constitution itself says that even if a member of Parliament dies, within a certain space of time before the elections, there will be no by-election. What does that mean? So that is clear that the Constitution itself knows and accepts that there could be some circumstances under which people in some constituencies would not be represented in Parliament. So that's clear. That's a bad argument to make. That argument doesn't make any sense at all because of what is in the very Constitution that we are trying to discuss. Now, this morning there has been a dispute here. And interestingly, the dispute has been between somebody who only recently left the NPP communications team and one who is still a member of the NPP, communications team. My brother, here again, I am completely lost. The version of the NPP constitution read by Solomon Owusu and the version read by my brother here all say that if you contest for another political party, so you automatically, the word is automatically. What does that mean? How else can that mean something else? Automatically lose your membership of the party. So nobody has to write to you. You don't even have to write to the party. You automatically lose your membership of the party. Now, sometimes we talk as if there's no history. There's a history. A leading member of the New Patriotic Party, he did not contest as an independent candidate. He did not join another political party. All he did was to say that President Mills could be a good president. And I'm talking to one of the Samuel brothers. All he did was to make a public statement that he thought that Professor Mills was a good man. He was sacked from the party. You understand what I'm saying? And he was sacked on the party, presumably on the basis of the provisions of the MPP constitution. So how come we are making these arguments today? How come we are making these arguments today? Now, for me, the other thing which is important is that let's take the case of Cynthia Morrison. Cynthia Morrison went to Parliament as an MPP candidate. What does that mean? It means that the people who voted for her in her constituency did not just vote for Cynthia Morrison, but they voted for Cynthia Morrison as a person they believe would work in Parliament with the MPP in order to achieve the desired objectives of the MPP. Clear or false? Two, clear, so clear. So when she's no longer contesting on the ticket of the MPP, she cannot be said or be seen to be working for the realization of the objectives of the MPP as captured in their manifesto and other documents. Clear? So the basis of her representation in Parliament is destroyed by her going independent. Because now what she's asking her constituents to vote for is for her as an individual to go to Parliament and push what she thinks in her mind, she thinks as an independent candidate will be good for the constituency and good for Ghana. She's no longer bound to represent the MPP. She's no longer bound to advocate for the policies of the MPP and to see that MPP policy is implemented through her parliamentary work. So these are two different mandates. Two different mandates. And that is why Article 97 is so clear on the fact that people like her ought to leave Parliament. Clear. So that's part of it, okay? Now, My brother, I find the latest development queer, absolutely queer. MPP members of Parliament signed a petition to the Speaker to reconvene Parliament. Parliament is reconvened and they are not there. I mean, who can explain this? They requested for the reconvening of Parliament. The Speaker acted on the basis of their petition, reconvened Parliament, and they didn't show up. Now, what is the excuse they are giving? The excuse they are giving is that, and I've heard them, NDC members of Parliament went to Parliament early and sat on the right-hand side of the Speaker. So what? So what? Now, listen to me very carefully. If these MPP members of Parliament, after compelling the Speaker to reconvene Parliament, had gone to Parliament and raised the issues and forced for a vote in Parliament, no matter where they were sitting, they could have done this. Whether they sat on the right-hand side of the Speaker or the left-hand side of the Speaker or in the middle, they could have raised these issues and called for a decision to be made by vote. They could have. Now, if they genuinely had the numbers, why would they run away? Because if they really were the majority and had the numbers in Parliament, regardless of where they sat, they could have voted and gotten decisions made. My suspicion is that they didn't have the numbers. And if you talk to members of Parliament, everybody knows that they don't have the numbers now. They don't have the numbers now because so many of their members appear aggrieved. And they cannot trust that they will be voting for them when it comes to voting. So that's very clear. If they really had the numbers, they would have gone to Parliament. Regardless of where they sat, they could have called for a division, even called for secret balloting and so on. They simply didn't have the numbers. That's number one. Now, number two. I am so deeply worried about the fact that our members of Parliament cannot do simple addition. They can't do simple addition. Addition and subtraction and multiplication is what is done at the primary school. So if you have people who have risen to become members of Parliament, who cannot, I mean, Solo was talking about mathematics. This is not mathematics. This is basic arithmetic. You have 137 seats. NDC has 137 seats. And you are fighting over who is majority. That is, even if the Speaker does not rule on Article 97. 137 and 137. And you claim to be the majority. How is that possible? Now, they make all kinds of arguments. I recall that when the Speaker of Parliament was called upon to make a declaration as to who is the majority in the House, the Speaker went to great lengths to explain that he was declaring the independent candidate plus the MPP members as a majority group and not the majority caucus. I hope you all recall. The Speaker went to great lengths to explain. Now, why did the Speaker go to great lengths to explain? It is the effect of Article 97, 1G and H. Because if the independent candidate had declared that he had joined the MPP in Parliament, automatically he would have had to lose his seat. You understand? So the Speaker thought that he was being more than clever by using group instead of party caucus. I vehemently disagreed with the speaker at the time. You recall, I vehemently disagreed with the speaker at the time and warned that this dancing around could have consequences in the future. Now, these are the consequences we are all facing. Now, there was an element of laziness on the part of Parliament. The rules of Parliament had always been crafted on the basis of the existence of a majority and a minority. Standing orders and all of that. Now, when we got a hanging Parliament, a hung Parliament of 137, what needed to be done was to change the rules. Because majority-minority no longer could work. And instead of changing the rules that govern business in Parliament and so on, we came up with this strange arrangement, which in essence, in its very essence, was a violation of Article 97, 1, G and H. Clear violation. But everybody allowed it to pass. You understand? So we had the majority group and the minority group. Now, I've made many comments about what is developing. What is developing. And I've said that we are not as yet in the crisis which some people will describe as constitutional crisis and so on. We are not there yet. But these developments could take us to the crisis. They could take us to the crisis when clearly the powers of the Speaker of Parliament clashes with the powers of the Chief Justice. Clear. Now, you have to understand that the Supreme Court can't cite the Speaker for contempt. If you read the Constitution very clearly, the Supreme Court can cite the Speaker for contempt. There's nothing in the Constitution or in any rules of court and so on which prevents the Chief Justice from citing the Speaker for contempt. Now, the same Constitution makes it clear that the Speaker, in his view, if in his view, he thinks that anybody is obstructing the work of Parliament, can also cite that person, which may include the Chief Justice and Justice of the Supreme Court, for contempt of Parliament. So, can you imagine a situation in which Supreme Court cites Speaker for contempt, and Speaker cites the bench of the Supreme Court also for contempt? What would happen?
Very high possibility.
What would then happen?
That would then be a crisis.
Who would implement the decisions of the Supreme Court and who would implement the decisions of Parliament? That would be when we would have arrived at the crisis point. But I insist that this crisis can be avoided if politicians with over-bloated egos will stop doing everything and anything possible for them to have their way, irrespective of the circumstances in which we are. Now, Parliament is a place for debate, it's a place for negotiation, it's a place for consensus building, and it's a place for decision making. So if you have good leadership, there is no way any problem cannot be resolved. And I had the privilege of interviewing Justice Jose, who is a retired appeal court judge. And he makes this point very clearly, that it's the quality of leadership which has become the problem. And I recall him making the point that he actually misses Chairman Samples This is Justice Doche. This is not me. So he, as a former Court of Appeal judge, is sitting back, looking at what is unfolding and saying that the personalities involved could be part of the problem. And who would disagree? I listened to the Speaker of Parliament, and he says, since these problems started unfolding, the only people who have called on him to have a conversation about how to resolve the possibility of a crisis and so on is a delegation of the Council of State and one or two pastors. So the NPP and its members of parliament have not even attempted to create a forum, to participate in a forum to resolve these matters. And that's strange. That's completely strange, you know. Master, the other thing which just worries me, you know, is that if you look at the petition which forced the hand of the Speaker to recall Parliament, it is stated that there is urgent government business or businesses to be tackled. Urgent. One of the items on the list of priorities requiring the Speaker to reconvene Parliament is tax waivers. I'm confused. So far, I haven't heard or seen anybody, institution or group of persons, having done a cost-benefit analysis of these tax waivers. For us to continue to be granting these tax waivers, we have to be convinced that these tax waivers are in the national interest and that they contribute to our development. Do you have any evidence? Does anybody have any evidence that the millions of Ghana cedis we have been waiving as taxes has made any impact on the economy? There's no such evidence. So how that becomes an urgent, important matter requiring parliamentary attention and creating all this hula baloo and so on, I just wonder. Yes, I just wonder why. Then we are told also that there's a loan agreement which has to be ratified by Parliament. Loan agreement again, another loan, another loan, less than 1 month before government changes. Another loan for what? And why is that loan so crucial, so important, and so on, that we have to go through this hop, jump, and step, or step, hop, whatever? I just wonder. Look, and I intend to end here. Look, the Supreme Court ought to understand clearly that the 5 or 7 of them who sit there in the court, sit on that superior bench in the name of 32 million people of Ghana. Sana, if all the 32 million people of Ghana could be empaneled to hear cases of the interpretation of the Constitution, to try criminal cases and so on, we would not have a Supreme Court. The reason why we have a Supreme Court is that it is impossible for all the 32 million of us to be empaneled. So through some arrangement that we have agreed, we have selected a certain group of people based on a certain criteria to advocate in these matters, so they do so in our name, on our behalf. The Supreme Court exercises the sovereign will of the people of Ghana. You understand? It is not above the sovereign will of the people of Ghana. We need to understand that clearly as a matter of principle. So that imposes a duty on the judiciary, the Supreme Court, the courts of appeal, and so on, that at all times when they are taking decisions, they ought to have at the back of their mind that that decision is being taken in the name of Kwesi who is a security guard in cantonments, who perhaps did not have the privilege of going to secondary school. That decision is being taken in his name and on his behalf. That decision is being taken in the name and on behalf of Abna Mansa from Drama, from Gomoa Drama, who didn't go to school at all. You understand? They have to understand that clearly. Because sometimes the impression is created that these are special people with special people coming from some strange place and so on, who are not one of us or some of us, who are above us in everything, and they act on their own. They don't. The very principles of the Constitution, the very principles of law and so on, is clear. They act on our behalf and not above us. Now, I think we can say the same about Parliament. All the MPs and officials of Parliament are there because all the 32 million people in Ghana cannot fit into Parliament House to make their decisions. So through some processes of elections and so on, we have decided that they, 275 people, should go there and do that on our behalf. They must be reminded at every stage that they are not above us, and that the power they exercise is the expression of the sovereign will of the people of Ghana. And same for the presidency. Because in these days, you are hearing a lot of questions about powers, separation of powers, and how this power is so unique that it may not be encroached by the other and so on. All those powers, executive, legislative, and judicial, belong to the people of Ghana and not the individuals who are sitting there. It must be clear. Now, whatever happens, ultimately, no matter what the Supreme Court decides, no matter what everybody else decides, no matter what the Speaker wants to do and not do, and so on, no matter what the major political parties want to do or not do, ultimately, this matter will be resolved on the floor of Parliament. Ultimately, it will be resolved on the floor of Parliament. It cannot be resolved on the floor of Parliament in our circumstances if one of the two parties in Parliament decides to boycott. It is impossible. If NDC decides to boycott, Parliament will not have the numbers to take a decision. If MPP decides to boycott, Parliament will not have the numbers to take a decision. So it is imperative that Parliament is reconvened, and that both sides should go to Parliament. Who cares about where anybody sits? Who cares? What we want is results, which will move us forward. Where you sit doesn't matter, whether you sit on the left or you sit on the right. How does that change the law? How does that approve? How does that approve, what do you call it? Tax waivers.
Which is one of the things they want to do.
Oh, but they have said that it is one of the things they want to do. Tax waivers and taking loan.
That's right. The naming of JB Dankwa, what?
Yeah, they brought some, for they are floating a number of bills.
Yeah, but I'm talking about those that were in the petition. They listed the petition. I think we should be fair to them.
Sure.
You know. So, Parliament must meet. Parliament can meet by following its procedures. By getting the business committee to meet and to agree on the business of Parliament. Parliament can only meet if there's a quorum. Those who have made up their minds that they would not make Parliament meet, they should know the consequences. They should know the consequences of their actions. And it is up to them. Do you understand? Anyway, let me end here.
Thank you. I've heard so many things. But the main problem is who sits where. Now, as long as there's an insistence
Should
that
be a problem, sir?
leave right and go left,
The
one will not come in.
I am part of the theatre. I think we can describe what is going on as a theatre performance.
Theatrics, yes.
And you see, who says where shouldn't be an issue.
No, but it's an issue now.
Those who are making it an issue are the problem. The way Parliament works is that it is the Speaker who must communicate to us. It is based on what the Speaker communicates that we act. As of the last official communication that the Speaker made to us on this issue that we are still dragging, there was no indication to us that where we claim is our rightful new place to sit, based on what we know in the standing orders and in the Constitution, has changed. And you see, the Speaker cannot bring any new communication which indeed will constitute a decision if the House is not properly constituted. So if the minority want to hear the Speaker make a communication, they ought to come and sit at the minority side. We will sit at the majority side, and based on the communication that the Speaker makes, if it means that what he had communicated earlier on, he has reversed it based on a so-called stay from another institution, we have said we have no problem. We will move, but first you must come in for the processes to unfold.
But Master, it's more simpler than this.
Very well.
Look, unless all NDC parliamentarians would arrive in Parliament at the same time, which is impossible. Unless all NPP parliamentarians would arrive in the same time, what is likely to happen is that one person would arrive, the second person may be an NPP person, and so on. So, given the natural circumstances, it is possible for this right and left to be mixed up. Yes. If you all arrive,
yes,
as individual MPs coming to Parliament on a regular basis and so on, when the door is opened, the first person to enter will go and sit on the majority side. The second person may not necessarily be an NDC person. The first person may be an NDC. The second person may not necessarily be an NDC person. He sits on the majority side. So you have MPP and NDC sitting on the majority side. That way, the whole house gets filled without regard to this left side and right side. Common sense, reality, and so on. Is that a problem? How would that be a problem? The problem is that some people decide even before the doors are opened that we are not entering. That is why it is possible for one side to occupy that right side. If we are all entering,